lives, I am sure that we will have experienced people who have been approachable and those who have been unapproachable. Perhaps we've had a boss whose door was always open, or whose door was always closed. We've maybe had one of those neighbours who was always happy to chat over the fence. Maybe we've had a neighbour who just made sure that they built a taller fence. And as for families, well, we know that there are some within our families who are perhaps more approachable than others. This morning, I want us to take a little while to ask ourselves a couple of questions. Does being a Christian make us more or less approachable? As a Christian community, serving the local community, are we seen as approachable or unapproachable? Last week we reflected on the story of the healing of the paralysed man. We're told in that passage that Jesus returned back to Capernaum, maybe looking for a bit of time out, but all of a sudden a crowd gathers. Then all of a sudden there's a hole in the roof, and all of a sudden there's a man in front of him. It's a story of how approachable Jesus was. And actually, over the next few weeks, as we continue our series on encounters with Jesus, we just continue to see how approachable Jesus was. And so, in our reading today, we find Jesus being approached by two different individuals, as well as being surrounded by a crowd. This being Father's Day, it seems appropriate that we take a moment to think about a father and the plight that he was in. We're told that Jairus was one of the synagogue leaders. He was an important figure in the community. He was one of the brightest and best. He would have been thought of as somebody who was ceremonially clean. He would have been one of the elite, the establishment in his town. He was one of those people who, if you were having a get-together, if he was on your list of guests, you were in a good place. However, this powerful figure in the community, this religious man, all of a sudden pushes his way through a crowd and throws himself at the feet of Jesus, humbling himself. Maybe some of the crowd were looking and thinking, what is this? He's shown himself up. What is he doing? But he is desperate. His 12-year-old daughter is terminally ill, and he pleads with Jesus to come and heal her before it is too late. And so Jesus agrees to go with Jairus, this powerful, educated community leader, someone who was someone in society. And they headed off in the direction of his home. I sometimes think that Jairus was probably going, come on, Jesus, keep up. Okay, come on. And then there's this second character that we encounter. A nameless character. All we know is that there is a woman who has been bleeding for 12 years. And she comes in the hope of being able to touch the robe of Jesus. That's because this woman, with her condition, was seen as being unclean. She couldn't go to the temple. Anyone she touched would be seen as unclean. Now, we've just had, and still have, this odd thing where we're not allowed to do any human touching. We're allowed to hug our nearest and dearest, I think, but I'm not allowed to shake your hands. No touch.
And this woman has had that for 12 years. No human contact because of her condition. So she was basically cut off from all sorts of normal community life. No social interaction. And she couldn't go to the temple. She couldn't go and express her faith. Because of her physical condition, she experienced mental, emotional, and spiritual anxiety and stress. She'd sought advice from every single doctor she could think of. She spent all of her money, nothing. So she comes also desperate, but a little more secretively, a little more covertly. She just simply wants to touch the cloak of this great man. Two people from opposite ends of society. One a man and a leader, a person who was someone. The other side, a woman, unclean and to be avoided at all costs. Both in their desperation come to Jesus. As we look at the life of Jesus, we discover that he was so very approachable. Why was that? Why was it that somebody at the top and somebody from the bottom both felt able to approach the same man? Why was it they felt able to come to Jesus? The first is this: Jesus was available. It may be that occasionally, if you ever try to phone me, you'll get this message: I'm sorry, Grant isn't available. If you like to leave your name, your number, and a short message, he'll get back to you as soon as possible. Because I'm busy. Might be that somebody comes and says, are you available at such and such a time? And I'm sorry, I need to try and find a gap in my schedule. Hold on. But in so many ways, Jesus seemed to be available all of the time. He could be found by people. He walked the streets. He attended weddings and parties. He ate with people. His ministry took place on hillsides as well as in synagogues. He didn't just stay in one place and expect everybody to come to see him. He went around the villages of Galilee. He went where people were. Jesus was available to people. The second thing that made Jesus approachable was his reputation. Reputation is everything. Let me tell you, I've had two tradesmen, I'll not identify them by name. The first one, let me tell you, he got 5 stars on Yelp, which is an online review place. A painter and decorator who came 3 weeks early. Yeah, that was my reaction. Who would think? 3 weeks early. He phoned me up and said, can we come today? And he did a great job. As for the plumber, it was only after 37 days that we eventually had a shower that was watertight and a court case proceeding. Reputation matters. Jesus had a reputation. People spoke of how he taught, healed, and delivered. People had a story of his compassion, his care, his kindness. People told others of their experience at the hands of this wonderful man, how he listened to them, how he acted, how he touched and healed, how he'd not turned them away, how he had welcomed them and not judged them. Jairus and the woman approached Jesus because he was available and because of his reputation. And both of them left as they had hoped. For Jairus, his daughter is healed and brought back to life, and for the woman, she is able to get on with living life. Jesus responded to Jairus and the bleeding woman with love and compassion. So as we think about the approachable Jesus, I wonder, how approachable are we as the church the body of Christ, in the world that we are in today. I wonder how approachable we are as individuals, as followers of Christ. How available are we? And what's our reputation? Regrettably, the church and indeed individuals are not always considered as modelling the approachable Jesus. In his book, What's So Amazing About Grace, Philip Yancey shares a story in the opening pages. A prostitute came to me in wretched straits, homeless, sick, unable to buy food for her 2-year-old daughter. I asked if she had ever thought of going to a church for help. I will never forget the look of pure shock that crossed her face. "Church," she cried. "Why would I ever go there? I was already feeling terrible about myself. They'd just make me feel worse." Yancey asks, why is it today's prostitutes run from the church when prostitutes of Jesus' day flocked to him? He suggests that it is because too often people do not see churches as places of acceptance, protection, and nurture, but rather as a place where they will be judged, condemned, and where there is a lack of unconditional love. In my previous job in Tulloch in Perth, I got to know a man who had had a genuine conversion experience, a real encounter with Christ during a time in a Christian rehab centre. His newfound faith inspired him and helped him as he sought to overcome his addictions. However, in the years since, he has at times relapsed into his addictions. And he said to me, as much as churches say you're welcome, eventually I became too much for them. They can't manage me. So I just try and survive on my own. Or I think of a church where the presence of children from a travelling background led some families to withdraw their children from attending Sunday school, and asking the minister to decide which types of families did he want coming to church. In these situations, we see congregations being less approachable, less available, and with a reputation that does not speak of compassion or concern. What about us as individuals? How approachable are we when it comes to issues of faith? Whether in person or on social media, there seems to be a sense in which Christians don't always seem approachable. Our faith, rather than providing a doorway to conversation, sometimes seems to be a barrier. In living out our faith, we become known as argumentative. Or maybe that's just me. As we always seem to be rigorously defending our Christian position. Don't go and speak to Grant about that. You'll just wind him up. And then he gets grumpy. Okay? But that might just be my children talking. Don't mention it when he's here. You know what happens. Let's just stick to talking about the fact that it was a good result on Friday. Whether it is that we're trying to defend our biblical worldview, sometimes we come across as being judgmental and harsh. Or it might be that we are passionately telling somebody about how much Jesus can change their lives, but for the person, they just feel that you're not really interested in their story. You just want to turn them into someone like you. Some Christians seem to be less approachable. What about us? What about us as a church? How approachable are we? How available, and what is our reputation? In our homes, amongst our friends, in our workplaces, how approachable are we? And so, perhaps we need to think about these 3 particular challenges. The first is this. We need to learn to love like Jesus. You know, when Jairus came, or when the bleeding woman came, Jesus saw 2 individuals that were created, made in the image and likeness of God. And so Jesus' response was that of love, unconditional love for those individuals. The second thing I want to suggest that we need to do is we need to be willing to listen and respond like Jesus. You know, it's amazing. Jesus is surrounded by all these people. Jairus is pulling him, going, come on, we've got to get down to the house. And yet he was so aware of the fact that there was something else that happened, that there was another person present. Apparently a nobody. But to Jesus, he was aware of that she was a somebody. He was sensitive to what was going on. He was listening. He was aware. And he was willing to stop. He was willing to change direction. And so for us, perhaps we need to be more able to listen and to be sensitive to what is going on around us in our community and in our lives. And the final thing is we need to be willing to act with compassion and kindness, taking an interest in the whole person. Jesus encountered Jairus and the hemorrhaging woman. He was available. He had that reputation of compassion and care. And he loved them. This week, may we be available. May we be compassionate and caring. And may we love the people who present in front of us. Jesus, approachable. The church and us as individuals, may we become like Jesus. Amen.